Hey, Urza Master fans, we are finally here. We are at the moment where we're going to be putting together our Ryzen 5 machine. Finally got everything in from Amazon. We've already seen the 5-volt ARGB IceMoon 240 liquid cooler. We did a little short on that. We've also taken a look at our GeForce RTX 3060 Ti. And previously we'd looked at this T-Force M2 solid state drive. This is another one we're going to be putting in there. A couple of these, the graphics card and the Samsung drive, I got renewed. We've got the rip jaws and the thermal take power supply. Motherboard is in here. We'll take a look at that shortly. And for the case, we've got an MSI MagForce 112R gaming case. Now this should be, when complete, a fairly decent gaming rig with that Ryzen 5 chip in there. Let's go ahead and open up the case and take a look at what this is going to look like, and then we will get into the so far mystery motherboard. So if you were hoping to see me slice this open, I'm doing this handheld, so I apologize, but I got this box of Kata box cutters, and they come with a bunch of these replacement razors. Super sharp. I lost the guard for this one, but works great if you're opening boxes. I have yet to have a blade go dull, and I use these all the time. This isn't a product plug, but they're cheap on Amazon. Highly recommended. Now, let's open up the box. Obviously, it's a fairly plain case. It's black. This one is meant to kind of highlight the RGB, I think. I'm not a big RGB guy, but I do like the little dragon going on here. That's pretty cool. And it comes pre-equipped with some cooling fans up front. I assume these are, colorized LEDs, as we'd call them back in the day. Probably RGB, which means it's going to play well with MSI components overall. So one thing for my nostalgia friends out there, I know this is a new build, but I'm sure you guys probably remember back in the day with LAN parties, carrying around your computer cases. I've got my Windows 98 machine that has the little handle built into the top. I was a guy, I always saved the cardboard box, the styrofoam inserts, even this bit of plastic I used to hang on to all the time because it was very convenient to just put some styrofoam on the top and protect your case for LAN parties. So don't know if anybody still does that, but I'm considering saving it, I guess. So got LED control on the top, 2 USB 3s, pretty standard mic and headset plugs for your old school plug styles. Power button here, if we move this little magnetic deal, nice little shield shaped switch. Reset button, which I appreciate as an old school guy. Back of the case looks to be pretty standard. We've got a built-in fan back here as well. Pretty standard motherboard opening. The nice little standoff screws for the thumb screws. I like those. Power supply at the bottom, which I like. Plenty of expansion room. Let's go ahead and turn this around and get the plastic off and take a look at the rest. All right, front of the case, bare there. You got the cool little dragon logo, very plain front. I will say I kind of miss the control fronts of the 90s computers. I always like those. The top panel control is cool. I'm not against it, of course. Let's go ahead and turn this here. Tempered glass side, obviously, with today's RGB standards. This is a pretty common feature. I happen to like them. You can probably see my reflection there. But you can see I've got a case right now. It's RGB capable, but I'm just a blue guy, so I like the blue LEDs. And then, again, cooling fan on the back. I really like the power supply slot. My favorite is a lot of this comes pre-wired for those USB controls, so you don't have to run any of that kind of minutia. It's got the dustbin underneath, which is always handy. That's one thing about the nostalgia machines that I kind of wish they had more of. Plus, these are all MSI branded fans. That's pretty cool, too. I mean, I couldn't really care less. With my dumpster diving skills, I'll find a fan if I need a fan. But I'm really enjoying this case. This is not a terribly expensive case. Again, this is an Amazon basically built computer at this point. Everything is from Amazon. really excited to get this together. Obviously the backside here, that's just your cover. It's just plain flat black. I happen to like black cases. I know white is pretty popular as well these days, but if it can't be the old cream colored plastic, black is pretty cool too. So let's go ahead and get her opened up, and let's take a look at our motherboard. All right, so one interesting thing here I wanted to point out with this board in particular is we've got a couple of open pin slots here. This is an LED controller. Kind of interesting, actually, that we've got these open bays, because we've got quite a number of devices here and components basically available for use. Not to mention we've got the standard hard drive bays down here, but it's interesting to see a controller of this nature just available and, you know, unprotected pins right here. So that to me was just an interesting point. We've got the laptop style hard drive mount right here, so I can definitely throw some dumpster finds in here. I do think it's interesting this is set up for SATA, but you could definitely put an IDE drive in here and put a converter in. I don't know that I'm going to do this. This is going to be more of a modern build, but I just find it interesting. Likewise, there's fan power available. That's going to get routed to the motherboard. I like the access. Now, one thing I noticed with a lot of these modern style cases is they're made for these modular power supplies, which I like modular, I'm not going to lie, but I also really enjoy ones that aren't modular because I'm not as tempted to swap them out and maybe accidentally underpower a machine. And frankly, some machines just don't need the amount of power those modulars bring, and I always feel like it's kind of a waste. Maybe I'm weird. Drop a link in the comments and let me know what you think about that. But this will be easy to route. There's plenty of space here. I can route cords up and through past this controller, right through there, or I can go up a step. Cable management is not my forte. Obviously, whoever at MSI designed this case, it's not their forte either. This is not horrible, but it's not perfect. But I do like that everything is kind of bundled well together, at least in terms of the things I care about. That's just something I thought would be interesting to point out. Good backside access here for our motherboard for mounting coolers and stuff. I know sometimes when we pull those proc fans, you tend to get things falling off. And you can see there's some spare hardware that they've included. I really like that they do that because some of the standoffs in these cases are, for whatever reason, proprietary. And sometimes it's hard to find screws. So let's go ahead and I think instead of going with the motherboard right away, I'm going to make you wait just a little longer and let's put the power supply in the case. All right, so we've got a 700 watt power supply here. 5-year warranty on these Smart Series from Thermaltake. What I'll tell you is anything I've ever pulled out of a dumpster that has a Thermaltake in it always seems to work. I really trust this brand. I'm not paid to say that, but that's just been my experience. Here's your standard connector set that comes with these. And let's see, here's our power cord, pretty standard. I don't think those have changed for many, many years. And there it is. Let's get it out of there so we can get a better look. All right, here's our Thermaltake from the side and the non-modular Bundle O cables. Now, I know what you're going to say already. This is why I prefer modular instead of these non-modular. Yeah, I get it, but I have to admit, there's something just nostalgic for me about a big giant mess of cables that I have to somehow fork in here to get to fit. But what do you do? One thing I wanted to point out is these silica gel packets. Now, I'm sure if you're building stuff all the time or buying electronics, you're going to end up with a bunch of these. Obviously, don't eat them. However, you don't necessarily need to throw these away either. One good use, me who likes to reuse, recycle, and repurpose for these is to actually put in your old cases or stored computers. So if you are like me and have several towers that you kind of rotate in and out of use, especially if you use one, say, for retro gaming, and you're going to store it for a while, it's not a bad idea to toss one or two of these in there just to keep the moisture away. Now, granted, moisture is not going to kill your electronics most of the time. Obviously, I pulled stuff out of snowbanks and gotten it running, but just in case, if you want to be extra cautious, this can help. Likewise, if you store components for some of those older computers, RAM, video cards, it's good to hang on to these. Or if you're a gym rat, throw them in your gym shoes, throw them in your gym bag. It'll help keep the moisture out and keep the stink down. So there you go. That's my recycling tip. All right, so if you wanted to argue with me about buying a modular power supply, you've got a strong argument because, like I said, I've got to figure out how to wedge this stuff in there. And mostly it's just an annoyance. Once this is screwed in place, I mean, routing these cables to a place where they can call home really isn't that big of a deal, but it is kind of a pain in the butt as you're going along. So totally valid. Like I said, this is more a nostalgia thing for me and a cost saver. Modular power supplies seem to be a little bit more expensive. I know I shouldn't cut corners if I'm building a modern machine. You're going retro, it's one thing. You kind of have to do with what you can find. But I made this choice. I stick by it. I like these immodular power supplies. I like modular too. I'm not trying to, spin stories out of school, but this is definitely just a nostalgia thing for me. So let's go ahead and get this screwed into place, and then we can start routing wires, and finally we can crack into our motherboard box. So I know this probably isn't super unique, but if you don't have a ratcheting screwdriver or nut driver, I really encourage you to get one, because some of these are fairly delicate and don't need to be cinched down super tight, and you can just get it to where it's tight enough. The other thing is I carry this with me when I go to the recycler. It makes it very easy to take out virtually any computer screws I may come across, and you can get plenty of inserts, so if you run across safety screws, torque screws, or anything that might be unusual, you can still get in stuff. One thing I will say, the black finish screws kind of leave a lot to be desired, because inevitably you're going to strip a little bit of that color off, and it's not going to look perfect. Now for me, a guy who uses a lot of old rusty components from the salvage yard, I'm not terribly worried about a little bit of cosmetic issues. Focusing on my camera, that I do kind of worry about, but the cool thing with this is this extra hardware. Obviously, you've got some screws, you've got some thumb screws, got some filler panels, and some additional wiring. And obviously, they must know that people really, really care about cable management. They've included some zip ties. Yes, I am actually going to be zip tying this. And why not? You can drop in the comments how you feel about my cable management at the end of the video. I have to say, I can't wait to hear what you think. All right, so typical ATX style case, nothing really all that unusual about it, although I don't often see them with this large of a motherboard back access. I personally really like that, as well as it's got good 24-pin access through here, plus a little bit on the side. I just happen to like the amount of open space in here. That's probably just personal preference. I like the honeycomb at the bottom. It offers some protection from the wires. You got a little stuffing space in there, as I like to call it. And of course your bigger hard drive bays at the bottom. I have to say, as a retro guy, used to throwing in optical drives, I miss the optical drive extras that we needed in these cases back in the day. Although I have to say, from kind of an engineering point of view, it definitely opens this up and makes it way easier to get in here and mount a motherboard. So the quick installation guide gives you just kind of an overview of how to install your motherboard. Now, it's got 9 standoff spots, but only 6 are currently installed. Obviously, it's modular. There's plenty of ways you can install other types of motherboards in here. But I just wanted to get a good overview of what it looks like pre-motherboard, because next we're going to crack open the mystery motherboard box. All right, so for the big reveal, paper out of here. And yes, another MSI product. We are doing a MAG B550 Tomahawk Max Wi-Fi board. AMD Ryzen 3000 and 5000 series compatible. Now, I will say that unlike the dumpster find, I did ensure that you could use the Ryzen 5 5600X, which is what I have, with this particular motherboard straight out of the box, no BIOS flashing, nothing required. So I'm going to be pretty upset if my research has misled me. But this is a pretty versatile motherboard. It's kind of a budget motherboard, but it still can deliver really nice gaming performance. Obviously, once we get this built, we'll run some benchmarks and see if that bears truth. But I do like that it's got PCIe 4, and it also has NVMe capabilities, which is, again, a new thing for me. I'm kind of a platter guy, but I'm really excited to get this out of the box and into the case. All right, so tech meets aesthetic. Long ways from welcome to the world of friendly computing. But hey, I do actually kind of enjoy some of these decals. Not much into the camouflage, but some of this is kind of cool. I kind of like the dragons, and the battery stickers are kind of neat. I don't know if they're actually going to go on the case, but we'll set them aside. And actually, this decal is really cool. I actually really like this one. It does come, of course, with the Wi-Fi receivers and the tiny screws, which will be kind of handy for later. One thing it also includes is the DVD motherboard drivers and utilities, which is nice. I do, of course, keep it external for that. And then there's a registration card, which I'll have to register my product at when we're all done here. But here is the beautiful anti-static bag. You can see it's got the nice rear plate. Really kind of gorgeous. Let's take a look inside the plastic. All right, so here are your rear panel hookups. I love that it's got legacy PS2 support. We've got standard USB. We've got the flash button for the BIOS. So if we do end up needing to flash, we can. DisplayPort and HDMI native. USB, I believe these are 3.2s. And then I think this is the upgraded USB and USB-C. And then you've got 2.5 gig network capability, which is new for me. I've not had anything over a gigabit, so that's pretty cool. It's got the Wi-Fi, and it's got a premium sound package, which honestly for me is pretty cool. I've not had a machine with premium sound in a very long time. Everything on board looks, honestly pretty standard overall. I'm not seeing any surprises or any kind of uniqueness. In terms of modern boards, this is all pretty normal stuff. Lots of fans. You've got your rainbow hookups there for RGB, and your typical pins, PCIe connectors, and you've got this one here, which is kind of plated, which is neat. Graphics card support there, and it's got the M2 bay, and I think there's two M2 slots here. I'm assuming this must be our second M2, which is cool. It's got its own heat sinks, and then the onboard GPU there, of course. And then we've got SATA hookups as well. At this point, I don't think I have any SATA devices for this computer, but we'll probably add one at some point, knowing me. And then, of course, our slot. That is the wonderful socket AM4, which is, I have to say, a little bit retro, which kind of makes my heart happy. It's got the little lever, which is just, I just love it. We'll be pulling these off. This is for your standard AMD fans. I have a standard AMD fan that came with the Ryzen 5, but we've got the liquid cooler, which I want to use. That's going to go in its place here. Aside from that, got your standard 4 RAM slots. We've got our 128 kit that's going to go in there. Now let's look at our standoff mounts. We've got 1, 2, and 3. Pretty normal. 1, 2, and 3 across, and 1, 2, and 3. So we are going to install those 3 extra standoffs into the case before we mount this. So we have perfect stability throughout. Obviously, we've got good amount of money into this computer, want to make sure it's put together just so. All right, one nice thing about buying a matching make case and motherboard is everything lines up real nicely. There's a little wiggle on the standoffs. Once we sink the screws, that'll tighten up. But it fits really well. Looks like we're going to have good access to route all our cabling. And the back plate fits right in there. And the black faceplate matches, of course, the mag case as well. Now, I did not buy this as a package. I actually bought the case completely separately. So it's a little bit of a coincidence that these match. But let's go ahead and sink our screws. And then we can start doing what you guys want to see me do most, I'm sure, which is do all the annoying cable management. All right, we've got all of our screws but this last one here, which is why I actually took this video, is to just remind myself I have to do that. I do like the screws that came with this case. They're quite a bit smaller and different than what I would normally have used to sink a motherboard in, but they fit really nicely and they fit the aesthetic. So really pleased with that. And where do you start when you do your cables? Drop me a comment and let me know where you all do your cabling. I prefer to start with the fans because honestly these free pins kind of tend to annoy me more than anything. And then once I've got the small pin stuff put in, I like to then of course move to the 24 pin and get the graphics card power, the 8 pin for the CPU in place, and just kind of make sure everything is set to the way I want it. And then I'm fairly new to RGB, so I got to kind of figure out where all the RGB goes. But aside from that, it's kind of a straightforward process. All right, so preliminarily speaking anyway, this is our cable management. Now this, I am going to try and move a little bit. You can see it's routed through a little funky here. But that one does have to go up here because it's our 8 pin. Aside from that, this is relatively clean, even for me. I typically don't zip tie anything just because I do like to customize. I like to come back in here and move things around. This one seems like it's got an extra light capability, so if you wanted to expand your LEDs to something else, it seems like there's just a lot of extra light capability there. I guess I have no other way to put that. Why? Don't know. I don't know why you'd ever need that many lights. Maybe somebody can lighten me. Please drop it in the comments. I've never seen a controller like this mounted to a case, standalone. So this is new for me. I'd love to hear from you in the comments to let me know, what is this device really for? How many lights are you really running off of this? Because it seems like you really only have the one fan input, and that's powering the whole PCB here. So really would love to know more about this. So fill me in. All right, so we've got the wires in, and everything looks pretty decent. I'm not a huge fan of this USB controller being like just sort of a big arc there. I'm going to see if I can tuck these off to the side just for aesthetic purposes. Let's go ahead and mount our M2s, and then we will throw in our cooler and our CPU, RAM. Lastly, we'll finish it off with the graphics card, do a little cleanup, and I think that pretty much puts this one into where it's going to be. We'll get it hooked up and do a boot test as soon as that's all done. Pretty impressed with everything so far. The cable management, I will say the one thing I don't miss about building computers too often, and I apologize for the shadows here, is this darn front panel thing that's still all modular, and they always put it at the bottom here where it's hard to access with my giant hands. So it is what it is. I wish they could just brick it or convert that so that it was easier to hook up, but whatever. No big deal. We got it done anyway. So let's go ahead and keep trucking. All right, so in M2 slot number 2, we've got this T-Force Carter 0Z330. Did a short on this not too long ago. Now this one here, actually, this motherboard came with this heatsink cover. It's got a heat cooling gel pad on the back, so there's no need for any goop, which I really like. That's probably a common feature, and you guys are probably rolling your eyes, but I like that. Also, it preserves your aesthetic, which, again, for me, I'm a hodgepodge, customized kind of guy, so it doesn't really make me no never mind either way, but I gotta say it is really sharp looking. We're gonna go ahead and throw the Samsung, which is the higher quality of the two, in the one slot, and then we'll just proceed on with installing the rest of our accessories and peripherals. So I have to admit, I was a little nervous when I opened this up because, of course, it's a renewed product from Amazon, but I'm happy to report that it appears to be legit. The box was damaged, but everything else about this looks like it is perfectly intact and ready for installation. I do like the way these modern drives install. I have to say it's very easy. This one, of course, the heatsink's a little longer than the drive itself, so it has this nice standoff built in there. We'll go ahead and get that synced down, and then let's go ahead and throw in the processor and the memory, and we can start installing that new cooler. All right, so we've got our number 1 M2 in. We've dropped in our Ryzen. We've got our 128 gigs of DDR4 Performance G-Skill RAM. I'm not a huge fan of this being there, but whatever, it's not going to hurt anything. So the next step is to fit our RGB liquid cooler, which will involve taking off these standard AMD brackets, and then we'll have to mount the cooler to the top of the case here. All right, so for this kind of universal fit cooler, it comes with these brackets, and it has really kind of terrible instructions. So if you buy one of these Manaju coolers, basically you fit the bracket into the side of the pump here, and then screw it in up from the bottom, and then your AMD screws use the springs and washers that are in different bags, and some of these are separated Intel, LGA, and then AMD, and one says AMD and AMD 5, but it does fit basically all the AMD slots. So, and that actually goes back to AMD 2. So you can use this on older retro type stuff too if you want to put a liquid cooler on there. So I still enjoy this, but I will say it took me a little while to figure out exactly what their instructions were trying to tell me. So highly recommend having a jeweler screwdriver because it just makes things just a ton easier. Okay, so here we are. We've got the cooler mounted there, as you can see, and there's your pump. We just have to get our putty on there, mount it to the back plate. It's going to be a little bit of a chore just because you kind of have to hold the back plate with one hand and push the pump in and screw in the first screw with the other. Once you get one screw sunk, it's not so bad. All things considered, this was pretty easy to put together. Before I actually get the pump on, I do want to connect all these LEDs so they're in sequence correctly. And then it should just plug right into the board controller, allegedly, which there are several on here. So I think we're just going to pick whichever one happens to make the most sense once it's all in there. I see we've got one up top by the CPU fan controller, so that's probably our best bet there. So let's go ahead and bundle this up, and we'll take a look when it's all complete. All right, so we've got our liquid cooler mounted with our thermal paste underneath. Now, I'm a big dollop kind of guy. I didn't show it here because, well, to be honest, I was on a roll and I didn't want to stop. But I got a big dollop on there. They give you just enough to do what you need to do. Now I'm just going to move this rat's nest of cables off to the side, and then we will fit in our GeForce RTX, and we are basically done. At that point, it's just going to be hooking it up, installing Windows, and running some benchmarks. All right, so I misjudged which punch-outs I needed to remove. I actually had to take these two, but they give you these filler plates, so that's fine. But we've got the GeForce MSI loaded up in here. One criticism I have of this case design is you almost have to punch out these well before you mount the motherboard, because when I broke out this one, it dragged across the board, and it's covered up now by the graphics card, but it scraped away the paint on the board to the bare trace. So I'm kind of basically hoping and praying that these three traces all the way towards the front here weren't affected, because I can see them. I can see the solder. Hopefully it's just a scratch of the paint. Not going to worry about it. When I fire it up, if something doesn't work right, I'm going to be real upset, and probably will reach out to MSI because that is just a piss poor design. Again, it is user error, but I feel like the way it's designed is flawed, frankly. That being said, we've got everything installed. Otherwise, just going to plug up the power to the graphics card here, and we are essentially ready to put the glass back on and get this one to test. I will say there wasn't really a great way to manage these cables here, but I zip tied them. They'll be fine. Overall, pretty pleased with this build. I like the way it came out. I can't wait to see how it looks. Yeah, I mean, at this point, it's pretty much a done deal. Let's finish up and get her plugged in, and let's do the will it boot, and hope and pray that the scratch paint with the revealed traces does not cause any issues. So, of course, new tower, new monitor, Acer KB2. I know it's not like a performance gaming monitor or anything, but it's reasonably inexpensive, and, you know, honestly, it's going to make a great little test monitor for this, and it's going to be probably the standard monitor that this machine will use, at least for the time being. So we're going to hook that up. I've got a test keyboard here. I'm going to grab a mouse. Let's plug everything in and see if we can get booted to BIOS. All right, well, moment of truth. We've got our monitor, keyboard, and basically just absolute skin and bones here. I'll go ahead and give juice to the power strip. And we'll go ahead and give juice to the computer here. Oops. Oh, and I can tell already one of our cords is hitting this back fan. Got some red LEDs at the top. I don't see any LEDs otherwise right now. Just some of the basic stuff. Power to the monitor, I'm not seeing yet. Waiting on that to fire up. Not really pleased about the cord that's hitting there, but I don't think that's our issue. No display is probably because we're plugged into the graphics card instead of the onboard. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the power. And let's see. Got a couple of cords I think that need to come out of the way to eliminate the noise. Let's fix that, and then we will plug into the board with the graphics and go from there. All right, here we go. This is going to be power up number 2. Hopefully we've corrected that little fan tick. And apparently we haven't. So that'll be something we'll have to look for. Figure out which fan is ticking. Can't tell which. So there's that. And we've got a solid LED there, which is concerning. Alright, it came off. Again, no display to the monitor yet. Oh, there we go. The monitor itself just wasn't turned on, so that's good. That's encouraging. So aside from that noise, which we'll have to figure out where that's coming from, just waiting to see if we get any signal. No signal there, but again, I switched it to the board input. I know you're not supposed to do this, but I'm going to hot swap it over just to see. These are all MSI parts, so it's very possible that we may have some plug and play ability. Still no signal there. Okay, so a couple of things that could be. We've got no operating system, so that's a possibility. But again, we've got a solid LED here on the motherboard. And it looks like that's a boot LED, so let's dig into it a little further. Okay, so we're going to leave the glass case off at this point. I figured out what it was. Our RGB plug here was hitting this fan just ever so slightly, so we are clear now. And the LED we were seeing is in fact the boot LED, which would make sense because there's nothing for it to boot to. So we're going to go back to our HDMI onboard here. There we go. And I think at this point we should actually be safe to try and boot this and should be able to get it to come right up. So let's go ahead, give it a shot here. Let's see if we get a post boot. Again, there should be a BIOS that comes up. All right, I don't have anything there, so I'm just going to hot swap over to the graphics card. Don't think we're going to see anything here because it's probably already hit that boot. Okay, so no big deal there. Okay, this time we're going to power on, connected to the graphics card. I will say one of the tough things about not having a post speaker on the board is I don't hear much. All right, so we've got a BIOS screen that came up, and there we go. Everything is in place. We've got the Ryzen 5600X. We've got the memory at 131,000 megabytes, so 128 gig RAM. Sorry, base clock on the CPU, 100 megahertz. That's great. We've got 3.7 gigahertz frequency going right now. That's pretty good. DDR RAM set at 2NE666. The clock and everything is good to go. I don't see any warnings or anything concerning. No profile to load, of course. It's a 6-core processor, so we know that all the hardware works. That's really kind of the big thing here. I like everything I see. So at this point, it is literally just a matter of, getting a boot profile set up and getting this to boot. Getting our software installed, and I gotta say I'm very pleased. Also, I have to say that this relatively inexpensive monitor has some nice bold color. It's not too harsh on the eye, so I'm very, very pleased with that as well. And as you may hear, we don't have those annoying case sounds anymore. The RGBs are cycling all over the board, which is wonderful. Very pleased with that. So looks like we have a perfectly well-built MSI, which could almost be a pre-built with all the MSI products. I'm very, very happy that my little scratch on the motherboard is not affecting anything. Everything's plug and play with the graphics card, which is great. Probably not optimized, as you may guess. And everything seems to be functional otherwise. So overall, really happy we got to use this Ryzen 5. Very quick processor. Can't wait to get Windows thrown onto this machine. We will do a follow-up video with the benchmarks on this machine, probably as a short, maybe as a long form, depending on how things go with it. But if you enjoyed this video and enjoy my content, please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. Drop me some comments. I know I asked a few questions along the way of all y'all. Definitely would like to hear what your thoughts are. And of course, I do have more junkyard content coming. I know you guys probably are more into the retro stuff. I know I certainly am. This took a lot more hemming and hawing of my skills that I haven't had to tap into in a very long time. But I've got a lot of older machines that honestly don't have a lot to do with, so I'm going to be playing around with them and doing some fun things here, possibly in the near future. If you want more Urza Master content, just overall, head over to Pending Rebrand here on YouTube. I am part of that organization. We have multiple podcasts going. If you're a Star Wars fan, Star Trek fan, fan of the NFL, we've got an NFL podcast and the Meltoff podcast, which features my wife and I in our weight loss journeys. If you're not into that, no problem. Stick here on Urza Master. We've got more coming up soon.